what you produce and the way that you do it, the emotions that you tap into, I think are things that a lot of us feel blocked from. So we're intrigued to hear your journey, and I just want to give you like the biggest, warmest welcome.
Thank you so much. My artistic journey started at a very early age. I had a really unique upbringing. I was raised in the middle of a forest in rural Ohio, and I was homeschooled by my mom in an art based independent learning program. So it was very centered around the arts, centered around creativity. And I showed a great love for creativity and art at an early age. And my mom really embraced that and nurtured and fostered that in me. From the time I could hold a pencil, I spent hours every day drawing and practicing. And I also had private art tutors throughout my early education. And then I did go on to go to public school for high school, get a little socialization in me. And I went to college and got my degree in environmental science.
I'm going to ask you about that degree because that's super intriguing to what you're doing now. But I guess the first thing is, what an amazing, magical way to grow up.
Just learning to love to learn. I feel like that's something that regular school, public school can sometimes suppress in people. I loved learning and loved creating and was never judged for it and never suppressed. So I'm really, really grateful for that for sure. My mom is amazing.
I feel like that comes out so much too in the art that you have, that it's like the ideas that you have and the way that you do it is so different. I mean, all art is out of the box, right? But the way that you're doing it, it's almost like it requires this comfort without having these lines, like, right, without being inhibited the way that we are often socialized in school. I mean, I would have loved to have your background. What was your mom's background that had made her choose that? Did she also grow up that way?
She did not, but I think she learned through exposure to some of her friends. They all kind of went in together and decided to raise their kids this way. My dad's an entrepreneur, so I have a lot of that in me as well. My mom is an artist, a hobby artist, and an interior designer. So she's also really creative. And I think that's why she chose this specific program to raise us. I have four other siblings. So she was a busy woman for a lot of years. I'm the second oldest. And so she homeschooled all of us up until high school. And it was really, really great. Very grateful because you definitely learn to embrace your individuality and not be afraid of being unique.
When you went to university and you did environmental science, right? Was
Mhm.
it?
Yeah.
What was the thinking there? Was it kind of, well, I'm gonna let you answer. I'm not gonna lead
Okay.
it.
Yeah. I always had a very deep, intimate connection with nature. With the way that I was raised, I had so much time to be in nature. I mean, 10, 15 acres of just woods around us. And me and my siblings just got to run around out there and build forts. And there was a little river going through it, and it was just magical. So I spent so much time out in the woods, just sitting in the trees, walking around, connecting with the animals, connecting with nature. And so that has been something that really nature is my true passion. I have a talent for creativity. I love creativity, but I think we're all creative individuals. So with art, it's about kind of finding that path through creativity on what you connect with most. And for me, it has always been nature. And so I felt like I had a really great background in art. I'm sure I could have gained a lot from going to art school, but I was really, really interested in environmental science, nature, environmental biology. And so that's what I wanted to get my higher education in. And that has helped me so, so much throughout my art career today. Just studying botany, which is what I'm really interested in now, also studying various different types of flora and fauna and looking into the research behind these things because that's what I do when I'm creating my paintings.
It makes sense now when you see your art, because it feels surreal, but it also feels really real as well. It feels like the details of, especially, I'm thinking of the tulips in particular, but when you look at the details, they're so precise. It makes so much more sense now that you have that background, of course, that you would be able to see it in a different way. When you went into that degree, did you know, okay, this is just gonna help with my art? Or were you thinking, I'm gonna go and do a career in this, which is separate from art?
I was definitely thinking I'm gonna go into a career in environmental
Yes.
science. I think as you're growing up, you always have to push back on a little bit of what you've been so encouraged to do almost. Like, I think from the time I could draw, since I showed an early talent for it, it was like, "You're gonna be an artist, just duh." And yes, my mom was right, as they almost always are, but I did want to try something else, and I briefly did. You know, I had internships throughout college. I worked in environmental engineering, and I also really, really liked that. But every day, as soon as I got back from work, I would paint until I fell asleep, like every single day. And there did come a point where I was like, all right, this is what I have to do. I mean, I just was so drawn to it in every aspect, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so drawn to creating that I did decide to very quickly upon graduating take the leap to being a full time artist.
So there wasn't one particular moment that made you think, "Okay, I wanna be an artist instead." It was you were just recognizing that the thing you were putting all your heart into and your time into, your free time was the art, and so it was kind of like a natural, "This is what I'm gonna do
Yeah,
instead."
I would say it was more
Okay.
gradual, but, you know, it's sometimes it's hard to accept as you're growing up that your mom was right, but she was, and here I am.
Were there moments when you got particularly, I don't wanna say disheartened, but you know, when you're going and you're really trying to make it work and it was taking slower than you thought? Or if not, like, what was the thought or the mindset that kept you going? Because it is art is something that we always hear about, the starving artist journey and how it's so difficult to make it. What was it that kept you focusing on it?
Yes, there were definitely a lot of moments where I felt very discouraged. Art is an extremely volatile career. It's very unstable. Of course, I was smart about my finances. I was raised in a way to where I was very privileged in that I was educated about that, so I felt a little bit of stability there. But really what kept me going is that I couldn't not be an artist. And that's why I chose to be an artist because I think creativity and art is a beautiful thing, but it's not meant for everyone to do as a career. I mean, really, it's best when it's a hobby because then you can be completely free and you can play and you can fully express yourself. And I decided to go into art as a career because I was so drawn to it that there just was not another option. And I think that's how it goes with a lot of people that have creative jobs. There's just, you get to a point where there's just not another option. You have to do it. This is your dream. This is your passion. And so I was definitely at that point. You know, I had gotten to that point after coming home from work every day and painting until I fell asleep at the easel and then waking up and doing it every single day and doing weekends. You know, I was like really making it every aspect of my life that I could already. And so I think it was undeniable for me. I had to make it as an artist. And it was not easy. Oh my gosh. It still isn't completely easy, but I love it. It's definitely my dream.
I think a lot of people, you're right, in the creative space feel that of it's so hard and it's really challenging and there's so many moments of self-reflection in it and where it personally just hits your ego again and again, but there is no plan B.
Mhm.
Like,
Yes.
there's not anything else you could do. Like, the mental strength it would require for you to go and not do this thing that you feel called to is too heavy. You can't do it. What were some of the things that surprised you in the artist journey once you fully committed to it? Either in terms of being in that art world or in terms of your process or connecting with other artists, like, what were some of the things that you had to learn or you weren't prepared for?
I think I was told a lot of times that it was competitive, that you had to be competitive with other artists. And it was like you versus them. And I've learned throughout this journey that that is absolutely not the case. It's so, so important to have a community of artists around you. I have so many wonderful art friends, some of which create work that's very similar to mine. So it might even be seen as competitive or I'm competing with them, but that's just not the case when it comes to art. The people that are drawn to who you are, that are drawn to your work, are there for a reason. Every artist is their own individual, and they're putting their own life experiences and inspiration into their work. And so people that are meant for your work will be drawn to you and will come to you and support you.
This is an important lesson for everyone. I feel like because it's so easy, especially I think, well, we need to go into this topic. Like, especially as a woman, a lot of times there's this idea that that you're in competition with each other for different things, be that your personal life or your professional. And to understand, as you said, that you are unique, what you're producing is going to draw people regardless of what someone else is doing. It doesn't take away. If anything, it proves that there's a demand and a need for
Mm.
whatever you're doing or what you produce. What has been your experience with being a woman in this artistic world and also bringing in the femininity to it?
So, we obviously live in a very male dominated world. The system that we live in is made to support masculine traits. And even in the art world, there's a very considerable gender pay gap and gendered exposure gap, actually more significant than the national averages. It's pretty astounding and, of course, discouraging. You can't let it get to you. But I knew about this when I was going into art. It was very apparent to me, not only through what I was reading online, but also through my experiences. You know, men statistically have a lot of the power and a lot of the influence, a lot of the money. They are in control of art institutions to a crazy extent. And that was scary to me. And I really wanted to succeed as an artist. And so early on, I just kind of thought, and of course, looking back, this isn't true necessarily, but my thought process was, okay, if this is what I have to do to make it, if I have to shut down the feminine parts of myself and really just highlight and embrace the more masculine parts of myself to make it, if I have to attune to men, that's what I'm going to have to do. And my personality is already a little bit more on the masculine side. I'm very aggressive, I'm very type A, I'm very disciplined and motivated. And so I just like went full force into that. And I did with my work as well. I still look back and love the work that I made in these early days. It was still so much a part of me, but it was almost half of me. Like I didn't talk about the feelings and the emotion behind my work really at all, because who cares about that? Boys don't, apparently. That's what I thought. This is so wrong. I'm looking back and I'm like, why did I think that? I was so young. But I didn't paint more feminine visuals, feminine subject matter. I love flowers and I never painted flowers, which is so crazy. I didn't even use like the color pink in my work because I was like, that's just a little too feminine. And I love the color pink. This is all such a big part of me as a woman. And of course, you know, I'm generalizing here those elements to all of us, and they're both very important. But I was really shutting down that part of myself. And it took listening to women like you, other podcasts, exposing myself to a community of incredible women to get to that point where I was like, I am literally only living half of myself in my career. And also, I noticed I started shutting down those parts of myself in my daily life. I was working incessantly. I was not taking any time for nurturing and self-care and relaxation and play and just all of these things that are so fundamental to being a woman. There just came a point probably only a year ago where I was like, this is ridiculous. Like I need to stop being afraid and I need to live my true self. And just over the past year, I've really been trying to accept those more feminine parts of myself and embrace them both in my work and in my life. I've been painting florals. I love florals. They're not only feminine, men love flowers too. But I've been using all sorts of colors that I love. I've just been doing what I feel most connected to. And most importantly, I've been talking about the deeper side of my work more. I've been talking about the feelings and emotion behind it and relating my experience as a woman to my work because that's a huge part of my work. And so it's been a journey for sure, re-embracing that, but I'm taking more time for rest and relaxation and play. I'm adding more creative hobbies into my life, which I think is creativity is just so closely tied to our femininity. It's such a beautiful thing. And yes, I get to be creative in my work, but that's my job. There's so much more to that where I don't get to completely be free and engage in play and have fun. And so I've been cooking more and I've got into sourdough and I've just been doing all these things where I'm actually just being creative in a free way that doesn't have all these extra things attached to it. And that also kind of relates to my more nurturing side, which I've been trying to embrace more, creating something and freely providing it to someone out of love. For me, it's for food because I love to cook so much. But yeah, that's been a bit of my journey. I'm still working on it.
Because as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, wow, the amount of drive you must have had to kind of silence this connection that you would have had to emotions and to nature, which you grew up in, and that
Yeah.
creativity in order to try to be in this space that you felt called to. Like, it must have been so difficult to feel that shift and to try to find inspiration when you're not doing these nurturing activities. Do you remember, like, where were you drawing your inspiration from when you were in those moments, like before you acknowledged, okay, I need to open up and let in more of this feminine energy. I need to find time for myself. I need to do playful things. What were you drawing from at that point in order to create?
In the early days, these are the pieces that I don't like so much. But in the early days when I was showing in Miami at different clubs, I put dollar signs in my work and just I added these things that like are so not me. And they sold well, but I was attuning to something that wasn't myself. And I've learned throughout the years that you cannot create unless you are being the highest, truest version of yourself. And that's an evolving process. But you also want to attract people that relate to you. So I was in this scene of people that were nothing like me. And I was like, okay, I'm selling work, but I don't like this. And so that really shook me to my core a little bit too and was like, all right, something's got to change here.
I love that you mentioned that, yeah, because it's something that we can really relate to in any work of where you are. Because I think most women listening have done this, that you've assumed a little bit more the traditional masculine energy in order to get ahead in whatever job you have.
Mhm.
And you have success with it. You do. People respond to it. But then it's almost like it puts you in these circles and these situations that don't really feel aligned. How is it with this makes me, I'm so super curious about this. So now that you're doing this in the last year where you're infusing all of yourself and you're explaining the emotions behind it and you're not holding back, what is the audience you have now like versus the audience you had before?
My big platform is Instagram. I get myself out to the world through social media. So that's when I'm saying metrics, that's what I mean. I do know that I have like 80% of the people that follow me are women. And so I have noticed that that has changed over the years and women are more drawn to my work. And I am so down for that because that is just such a beautiful thing. I have this great community now. I've also noticed that as I've been more vulnerable on social media about my work, as I've talked more about the emotion, feelings behind it, people are coming to me and being more vulnerable, and people are connecting to my work to such a different level. Also, even my clients coming to me for commissions are coming to me and sharing their stories. They're sharing about their personal growth. We're collaborating on creating something that symbolizes that. Like, that's something that I never did before. And so opening up and showing who you really are attracts the people that understand that and want to be a part of that. And so I have found that my community has drastically changed for the better.
Can you walk a little bit through? I'm super curious about this, and I think people listening will be too. How you go about creating a piece? What is the process? And you can even reference one that you already have if that helps to solidify it. But what's the going from the idea to the creation to the parts of you wanna infuse into it?
My subject matter is really inspired by nature just because I have such a deep connection with it. I think so many people do. And if they don't, they still, some part of them still yearns that. I also think nature is just so visually beautiful in the home, outside, wherever. Like it just attunes to a certain deeper part of ourselves and our human nature. And so I love that as my subject matter. But through those subjects, I also reflect on different things that I'm going through, different things that we are all going through. And a lot of people might be able to relate to. So for example, the tulip piece, that piece was titled Abundance. That is my word of the year. It's something I want to bring into my life, abundance of love, abundance of good energy, abundance of creativity and inspiration. And so that's where it all started. I mean, this is a huge theme, abundance, but it's something that I'm going through in my personal journey, wanting to embrace it and bring more into my life and manifest it. And so I saw this tulip that I just felt like it was so open to the world. You know, the petals are open, they're loose, they're accepting. And I decided that was the perfect subject matter for this big theme in my life. And so I sketched it out and I wanted to bring in a lot of color. I wanted it to be glowing with this welcoming light. And I sketched it out and I build my canvases from scratch, pine and cotton canvas. And then I start planning out the colors. And a lot of the colors are kind of intuitive as I'm going. I'll add different colors. I love really colorful, vibrant work. And then from there, it just goes layer after layer of oil paint. I paint a layer and then I'll wait a couple weeks for it to dry and then another layer and sometimes anywhere between 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers over the span of 3, 4, 5 months. So the paintings also live with me for a long time. And I think that's a beautiful part of the process. You know, you're going through this experience while you're making it and you're reflecting on all these things while you're making it. And so the painting itself is part of my growth. And that's what makes it so special as well.
It's incredible that it takes this long. I'm just thinking I'm obviously not an artist to be saying this, but I think it's incredible that it's multiple stages and every time you show up to that canvas, you are a slightly different person and you're bringing that experience and that inspiration to it so that by the end, it's these multiple snapshots of where you were at from the very beginning. Do you when you're doing it, what kind of helps you channel into the work? Is there a certain environment that you create, sensory or otherwise? How do you make it so that you're focused and ready to paint?
The part of it that's really fundamental when it comes to creating a beautiful creative space and a flow is the inspiration and initial intuitive planning stage. And that is only like a small percentage of the actual entire process. But it's really important to do that in the right mind space. And I have stopped if I was not in the right mind space because that's what creates the bones of the painting. I have an art studio. I love it. It is my special magical space. And when it comes to those really important parts of the creative process, I listen to music. Sometimes I sit in silence, which is hard to do because you are really in it. You're really reflecting and you can't escape anything. You know, you're not listening to a podcast. You can't just escape into someone else's world for a little bit. You have to sit there with what you're doing. And so I don't always do that because sometimes it is emotionally difficult, and some paintings I do. But when it comes to once I have the plan, then I listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts because there I've already got everything mapped out and planned out. And that is the many, many, many hours that I am bringing my initial plan to life. So I do a mix of both, but in the early stages, it's very important for me to be intentional about what I'm listening to and my creative space.
The silence is interesting actually thinking about that because I find it really difficult to create in silence. I sympathize. You're right that you really do have to sit with it. It's so easy to let things creep up in your mind when there's no distraction around there. What do you do if you are having really strong emotions about something unrelated to your art and you either have to or want to show up in paint? How do you manage that?
That is such a great question. And that's something that is not always easy. You know, life isn't always easy. I am not jumping into the studio today every day and happy and excited to paint. There are some days where I'm going through something. There's some days where I don't feel very well. There's some days where I feel really discouraged. And on those days, I don't create the initial plans for my work. Like I don't those are not the days that I'm inspired. Those are the days where I'm doing the repetitive tasks that I have to do. Some days, of course, I take time to rest and I don't work if I don't have to, if I'm really going through something. But I am intentional about if I'm not in the right mind space, I'm going to be doing admin. I'm going to be doing cleaning. I'm going to get my paints prepped. I'm going to be doing something aside from the work that needs the right energy in it.
Those are repetitive tasks, right? They don't require your absolute inspiration or motivation or any real emotional state that's high. It can just be things. And in fact, it's almost a waste if you use those inspiration days to do the repetitive stuff.
I know. That's why I say it's such a inconsistent and unstable workplace too in a lot of ways because you are personally so closely tied to your work. And so sometimes depending on how you're feeling, you have to switch things up a little bit.
I do a lot of writing with this and storytelling and planning. So it's different, like a different canvas, different thing, but it is similar in that sense of managing the emotions and the production and thinking about it. And I can relate to this a lot because I think it's quite similar how to respond to it. And then some days you say F it and you don't do it.
Yeah, sometimes you just lay out in the sun and that's a productive day too.
Well, final questions for you here is one, what is something that you wish everybody knew about your art or something that you wish was always conveyed in it? Something that's very important about the philosophy around it or the perspective.
I do want people to know that every painting has a lot of intention and thought behind it. Every artist works differently. There are some artists that can just get a picture and copy it down beautifully. There are some artists that, artists are just all inspired in so many different ways. Some work quickly, some work slowly. But I definitely want people to know that a lot of thought and care and love goes into every single one of my pieces. They're all very personal to me. I'll never forget them. They're like a part of me in some sense. And that I have a deep relationship with them, and that when you bring it into your home and adopt it, it means so, so much to me. And I have a connection with you through that work and through that relationship.
With the time you're preparing and the intention, it very much is that, right? Like that they've got a piece of your whole creation process and your thoughts and your emotions.
Mhm.
Last question then is where can people find you and find your art? I know that you were doing commissions as well. I don't know if you still are.
Yes, commissions are still open. I open them up for the first 6 months of the year. My website is silverfrancis.com, and I have a page on my website that you can read about commissions and see my work, see my prints. And then my biggest presence is through social media. I'm at Silver Francis Art on Instagram and TikTok and Pinterest. So you can find me on all of those.
I will include links to connect with you and to see your art, and I really encourage people to see it because you not only show the finished piece, you show the process, the painting itself, the mixing. It's really you feel like you're a part of behind the scenes. And thank you for coming on the show, for sharing really deeply, and for inspiring us.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your show and I'm so honored to be a part of it.